So yeah, this session is all about why aviation is a matter of climate justice and why we need to fight to stop airport expansion in particular. How can we campaign against this ever-growing, ever-polluting industry? And how can we call for better, fairer, and more sustainable systems to travel? So what's to come? First, I will speak for about 20 to 30 minutes about why aviation is a form of climate injustice, some false solutions and alternatives, and what we can do. That will be really quite a fast introduction, touching on a lot of different sides of this struggle. And yeah, in a short amount of time. So it will be really introductory, but if there's anything you'd like to know more about, do feel free to ask questions. And also there's lots more resources on our website as well. I'll then hand over to John and Jackie, who will speak about their campaign against the private jet airport on Barbuda. And then for the last 15 minutes or so, I would love to open up the floor and hear questions and ideas from you. So you're welcome to put any questions in the chat whilst we speak, and I'll get to them towards the end, unless they're maybe more urgent, then I'll try to address them directly. There won't be a break because it's just an hour, but feel free to step away if you need a moment. Before we get started, you might be wondering, what is Stay Grounded? Where are you from? So Stay Grounded is a global network of 200 member groups, all united for a rapid reduction of air traffic and a just transition towards mobility that works for all. It was founded in 2016 in Vienna, and it has since grown into a global network of quite a wide variety of groups. There is local groups against airports, climate justice groups, bigger NGOs, trade unions, but also some initiatives that work directly on fostering alternatives, and communities and organizations that are facing the harmful impacts of the so-called false solutions like offsetting and biofuels. So it's really a wide variety of knowledge, and that's also one of the main kind of functions of the network, is to share knowledge, exchange resources, support each other, and where we see relevant, campaign together for a just reduction of aviation. Just actually nice to show. These pictures are some of the things we've supported or been involved in many years, like disrupting the European Aviation Summit, this kind of community billboard action against Bristol Airport, and the blocking of a private jet sales conference in Geneva. And at the moment, supporting a national campaign in the UK called No Airport Expansion. So yeah, let's delve in. Why is aviation a form of climate injustice? To start with that, it's useful to get a bit better of an idea of what this sector is like. And well, first of all, it's one of the fastest growing economic sectors of the past decades. And to make matters worse, the pollution of aviation is also really accelerating. Global emissions of aviation have doubled since 1980, and there's no sign of stopping. The projections are to see at least 2.7% growth per year, and probably more, because it was meant to be more, but then COVID hit. However, there's been like we're nearly at the levels of pre-COVID again, and yeah, expecting 3% of growth per year. Why does the aviation industry want to expand? Well, a very, very clear motivation is profit. The aviation industry profits massively, and it does so a lot from public money as well. There is a lot of subsidies as well as tax exemptions specific to aviation. So for example, if you put fuel into a car, you pay tax on it. If you put it into a plane, very, very often the rate is very low, if there is any tax at all. Aviation was also one of the first to receive massive bailouts during the COVID pandemic, and that money did not go towards saving jobs. It went into the pockets of the companies. And yeah, we actually see that there's really bad and worsening working conditions across the sector. This is a photo of some strikers at Heathrow Airport striking against fire and rehire practices. And yeah, that's just one example of the ways that aviation employees are burdened with the costs of this profit making. So yeah, we see that this sector flies away with public money. What are the impacts of this ever-growing expansion? Well, as with many kind of mega infrastructure projects, what we see on the ground is that airport construction projects produce severe ecological and social damages. And that's why instead we Stay Grounded call for a mobility system for and by local communities. And I mean, I won't go too much into this because we'll hear a lot from John and Jackie about what that might look like and how people are standing up to these kind of projects. And we've also got this on the slide. You see this Environmental Justice Atlas, which we work together with. It's a website and you can go there and also read up on a lot of other cases. In the UK, we know that there's over 25 airports looking to expand in some way, including major expansions planned for Bristol Airport, Farnborough Private Jet Airport, Gatwick, London City, Heathrow, and many others. And this is an issue on many levels. I mean, first of all, in terms of climate change, I'll get to the emissions in a second, but something that is really apparent in the UK in terms of airport conflicts is that the kind of airport conflicts are planned on a case-by-case basis, and the cumulative emissions, climate change emissions, aren't taken into account. So these 25 projects are treated separately, whereas of course the climate impact is not separate. But also these projects, airports, are really impacting the health of people living nearby. The noise is really impacting their health. And we see across the UK a lot of repression of local democratic decisions as well as activism. So yeah, airport conflicts, they look different across the world. And in the UK, there are a lot of struggles going on as well. So let's take a closer look at the emissions. So besides these kind of more direct, on the ground consequences of airport construction, there is also, of course, the biggest concern for the climate. So aviation emissions in terms of just solely the emissions of CO2 and so-called non-CO2 effects together produced nearly 6% of current climate heating and 3.5% of all climate heating since 1940. So 6% of current human-caused climate heating comes from aviation emissions. And this is not just a huge number in itself for one sector, but especially considering who is flying and how that compares to other more important, essential parts of life. So to put the flight emissions in context, we've got this little graph comparing the emissions from one flight to other emission savings. So for example, the small yellow one is one kind of common popular short haul flight, and the longer yellow graph is bar is one longer haul flight. Yeah, we see that, you know, just taking one flight is massively more polluting than many other things you could do. I think as a network, we take quite a systemic approach and don't advocate specifically for like individual consumer change. But in terms of climate justice, two key takeaways from this graph, I think, are that, well, one, many people in the world have an annual footprint far lower than that of one long distance flight. And to those emissions are usually for basic necessities rather than the luxury of many of those flights. But of course, this doesn't tell the whole story, and we really have to look at who's flying. So on that, I wanted to ask you a little question, which is what you think the percentage of the world population that took an international flight in 2018. Feel free to put a number in the chat. Any number is fine. Any guess? One, 5, 10%? 3?
2%.
I didn't catch that.
2%.
2. Yeah. Yeah, you're kind of, ooh, 20%. I was about to say you're kind of in the right area there, because it's actually 2 to 4% of the world population took an international flight in 2018. And yeah, overall, we see that the wealthy few are flying the most. Only 1% of the world's population is responsible for half of all aviation emissions. So that's the kind of yellow in this graph. Meanwhile, 80% of the world never set foot on an airplane in their life. So that's the lighter blue here. So really what we see here is that a relatively small group of countries, of people, fly at the cost of many others. And those are often the ones who will bear the consequences of already existing heating and coming climate breakdown. And that's why we call for climate justice and a halt on airport expansion and the reduction of aviation. This kind of inequality also continues on a national level, including in England. So yeah, just to show, this is a Department for Transport report, which showed that the top 1% of England's population took approximately 20% of flights abroad, while 48% did not fly at all. This was for one given year, so it's not necessarily that those 48% never set foot on a plane, but still there is a very clear inequality. And I think, again, something we can really take away from this is not just that there is that clear unfairness in who is benefiting and using this from and using this sector the most, but also that we can really massively cut air traffic without hitting those who cannot afford alternatives, and without taking away flights from those who we think might have a good reason to fly. We can massively reduce air traffic, like starting with the top. And that's the approach that, for example, campaigns for a frequent flyer levy take. There's also these are numbers from 2018, but indications are that this inequality was far from getting better and perhaps only getting worse. For example, between 2021 and 2022, the number of private jets taking off from the UK increased by 75% just on that year. And indeed, I guess this inequality is the most perhaps visible when looking at private jets. And I mean, to that, the thing is that the UK is really the private jet capital of Europe. It's the country with the most private jets taking off across the whole continent. And I mean, the private jet sector is super polluting. It emits, per passenger, you emit 20 to 40 times more CO2 than an economy passenger. It also means the ultra rich are paying the least, because actually private jets often pay 3 to 7 times less taxes on already very few taxes compared to the aviation, compared to commercial aviation. And despite all that, this particular private jet industry is going through skyrocketing growth. At the moment, 1 in 10 flights departing the UK are private jets. That is once every 6 minutes. And according to a government commission report, equals 200,000 people taking a return flight to Hong Kong every year. One of the longest flights you can do from the UK. So yeah, private jets are like the kind of most extreme of the inequality of this industry. And all in all, if everyone in the world, if everyone in England flew like the top 1%, total aviation emissions would be 20 times higher, and the national total would almost triple. So I think that's all reason enough for us to tackle the sector here and work with groups across the UK, across the world to tackle it everywhere. So knowing all of this, that, this is an industry that wants to grow, that flies away with public money, that's mega polluting, unequal in terms of who uses and benefits from flying, and harmful both in terms of the direct effects on the ground and the climate impacts. What's next? Well, the aviation industry is trying very hard to appear greener. I'm guessing we all have seen this, that they're very conscious that people are a bit concerned about the climate when taking a flight and would really like to keep selling those flights, and therefore come up with all these ad campaigns to convince consumers that green flying is possible, or responsible flying, or things like this. Very, very clear greenwashing, but we know better, because we know that these greenwashing attempts are pipe dreams based on technologies that do not yet exist, cannot be scaled up, or go hand in hand with even more ecological and social destruction. We don't have time to go into all the details about why these countless false solutions they propose don't work, but just to highlight a few I put up here. So-called efficiency gains are swallowed up by industry growth. E-fuels use way too much of our limited renewable energy supply. Fuel substitutes such as sustainable aviation fuel, which was in the news in the UK today, are not scalable and can also lead to new ecological and human rights violations. And similarly, offsets, they fail to reduce global emissions and again, lead to new ecological and human rights violations. And we've produced fact sheets on all of these. So if you want to look with more depth into anything, you can do so. But all in all, we believe it's clear that these distract from the need to reduce aviation now, and that the only kind of green plane is one that's on the ground. So we say, stop the greenwash. Of course, by the way, the industry knows this too. They're not living in an alternative fantasy. They very much know that decarbonized flying isn't a reality. And this is an email that was sent to a campaigner from Possible when he reached out to all the private jet companies to ask about their decarbonization plans. And he said, the emissions are unfortunately unable to be removed from the flight as this technology is yet to be discovered. Sad face. So yeah, of course they know this too. They just want us to believe differently. Fortunately, we do know as well that we have alternatives. I think again that this isn't news to anyone. Walking, trains, coaches are all emit much less than flying, and also aren't necessarily associated with the same kind of social costs as flying. But I guess the kind of key question here for us is, what would a mobility system built around these modes of transport look like? And how can we build this to be fair, affordable, and sustainable? So yeah, to get there, we see a whole variety of measures, solutions that we can take. there's no kind of single measure that will, you know, transform this whole industry in one go. We really need a whole set of different steps. And just to highlight maybe a few, we could put taxes on aviation that aren't currently there, which I touched on before, such as on fuel. We could immediately halt all new airport infrastructure construction. And with that, for example, a stop on all airport expansion for now. We could put in a frequent flyer levy, meaning that people who fly more pay more. Or, yeah, and I guess overall support a just transition, meaning we make sure that the workers in this industry take part in the decision making for the changes that are ahead, and are protected throughout. So, yeah, I can't give you the one answer here. Not pretending to. We understand it's a whole bunch, and that also really reflects the kind of diversity of our network as well. And all in all, as one part, we also often speak about the need for a whole cultural shift in regards to travel, in the sense that we need to find ways to not treat it as just kind of a nuisance to get over and done with, but something that can take longer and can be enjoyable. This is a quote from one of our members in India, who said, "In these days of climate emergency, train travel is a powerful way to slow down." And yeah, of course, for that to happen, a lot in society will need to be transformed. And that's also why it goes hand in hand with kind of broader calls for climate and social justice. So before I hand over to John and Jackie, I would like to highlight a few things we can do, but I'm also very happy to hear your ideas after. So in terms of actions you can take, you can choose alternative travel where possible, where affordable, where available. You can change your organization's travel policies to take that make that a little bit bigger. We've got some resources for that as well. You can support campaigns for a just transition towards a grounded mobility system, and protest and take direct action against airport expansions, greenwashing, private jets, or other targets. Yeah, there's a whole variety of things. And to finally highlight one of the campaigns you could support, which is No Airport Expansion, which is a campaign that started up last year in the UK. And we've been one of, like SayGround has been supporting it alongside many groups active in the UK. No Airport Expansion kind of, so its main demand is a halt on all airport expansion in the UK for at least 3 years. And it kind of came out of the fact that there has been across the UK a really long history of local campaigns against airport expansions, where people really have been fighting the fight for decades, and then seeing that it hasn't worked out. In some cases, there have been some important victories, but often also hasn't worked out, partly because, as I said earlier, these airport expansions are just treated on a case-by-case basis, as if it's just a planning decision. And yeah, uniting all of those campaigns came the understanding that there's a need for a nationwide ban on airport expansion. And yeah, the main thing that the campaign is doing at the moment is to target newly elected MPs and influence the course that the Labour government will take on aviation. So yeah, you can follow us as well. And with that, I would love to hand over to John and Jackie to speak about Barbuda for 15 minutes, if you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jacqueline Frank, and as you can hear, I have an English accent. I am Barbudan by birth, And when before I was 2 years old, Mum and Dad brought me to the UK. As with many Barbudans, they travel from Barbuda to the UK, usually ending up in the city of Leicester. So I took early retirement and I went back home to Barbuda and subsequently became much more politically active and an activist. So the situation with Barbuda is back in 2017, we had the first ever recorded category that was given the hurricane that was given the category of 5++, and it damaged Barbuda significantly, but not unrecoverably. And as a consequence, the whole of the island, the whole of the 1,800 people were removed to Antigua, whether you wanted to go or not. You were removed. Some went through fear because we were told there was another hurricane coming in a week's time, and some wanted to stay and they were forcibly removed at gunpoint. So we were taken to Antigua and basically held there for about a month until sometime in October because the government declared a state of emergency. But what we subsequently found out that whilst we were in Antigua, the government enabled construction companies to go to Barbuda within days and start to build what they call an international airport. Now, Barbuda is only 62 square miles, and a significant portion of that is wetland. So it's wet. It's not somewhere that you can build easily. And so they started to build an airport, and they weren't building the airport for the people of Barbuda. They were building the airport for contractors and a company called Peace, Love and Happiness, who work with another company called Discovery Land Company. And they are in the business of building luxury homes, luxury apartments that are sometimes occupied. And they're doing it for the rich and the famous mostly. On Barbuda, the famous is Robert De Niro. And I don't know if he's rich, but the famous is Robert De Niro. And when you read the lease, part of the lease agreement specifies that an airport must be built so that private jets can be accommodated on the island. Now, to do the building and the construction, they had to tear up a significant part of Barbuda. They removed boulders, they removed topsoil, they removed anything that was going to be in their way. And regardless of the impact on Barbudans, and there has been some social impact because the area that they have cleared is an area where the hunters on Barbuda go and they look for food. Barbuda is an island that has always been self-sustaining for the most point, in that Barbudans only use and take what they need. So if there's meat needed, they will go and hunt for what we call land turtles and deer. So there's deer meat in the sea. They hunt lobster and fish, but they own Barbudans only ever take what they need. And I was approached one day by a hunter who worked at the airport that's been established for years. It's just a small airport, but it serves the island perfectly well. With a 7 or 8 seater plane, we don't need a big plane like what they're planning. And he approached me and he was very angry that he went to go hunting one day and he was met by a 10-foot fence. He could not access the land that he was used to going on. So the upshot of this disaster capitalism is that people are having their normal way of life altered in favor of a few super rich people who want to bring their jets to Barbuda for however many days of the year they want to do it. Because Barbuda is not a place that I imagine they'll want to live because of the natural occurrences like hurricanes that are coming more frequently that are causing more and more devastation. So when this happened with the airport, at night, when we got back, were able to get back on the island, at night, you could look outside because it was pitch dark. We still didn't have electricity, but there was a big light in the distance. And you thought, what is that? What's going on? I mean, it became clear that secretly, quietly, with little fuss, they'd already started, with the assistance of the government of the island, to create this huge runway that's as big as the runway in Antigua, and it can accommodate a jet plane. It's unnecessary, and it's created a lot of environmental damage. So as a consequence of that, Mr. Mussington and the Barbuda Council initially were going to challenge it, but the council dropped out. So we continued, just the two of us, to try and stop it because of the environmental damage that was being done. And it's already affecting, well, there's already climate effects here on Ireland, not necessarily straight from the airport, it's not active, but I'd say the last 3 years have been incredibly hot in the summer. When I call family in Barbuda just this last week, the first thing they tell me is how hot it is and how the weather's changed. But this time of year, it's not normal, the weather that they have. It's just incredibly hot. So this airport has not only affected our cultural and social way of life, but it's also affecting the climate, which will eventually affect us, because Barbudans are also people. They hunt and they fish, but they also grow their own crops as much as possible to feed themselves, because right now almost everything's imported and people are moving back to using the land to support themselves, and the sea as well. But it's proving increasingly difficult because the rain patterns and the weather patterns are changing, and that is linked to climate change. And there isn't right now a lot we can do besides protest, as you're doing, with regards to the expansion or the building of airports that are not necessarily needed. And that has affected us already in a short space of time. One of the things that I remember was not November that's gone, and the one before, we experienced a day's worth of rain, but it wasn't particularly heavy. It was just continuous. But the whole island was flooded out, and Barbuda is a flat island. The sea's just there, and we were flooded out. Roads looked like rivers. It was amazing. And the area that's being devastated by a construction company, an area called Palmetto, which is also a Ramsar site, that was completely flooded out as well. And instead of acknowledging that climate change is real and they should leave the landscape alone, the contractors are trying to manipulate nature and make it work for them, which it's not succeeded, because a lot of their work is being flooded out. And all of this is linked to the airport, because with the airport, they're wanting to bring in more people, increase what they call tourism, which isn't tourism if all you're doing is building a house and staying in it sometimes. That's not tourism. That doesn't benefit anybody. It damages the land incredibly, and it's irreversible. In the immediate, it's irreversible. So our lives and our way of life is being threatened, immediately threatened, by the construction of this airport. So for me personally, it does affect me personally, because I grow things as well. Other Barbudans grow things. And so we had to take the case to the courts and try and get someone to listen to us. So I'll ask John to carry on with the story from there.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. And I'll carry on for the next 4 minutes or so. So we stay within our 15 minutes time. Hello, everyone. My name is John Mussington, and I'm Barbudan. Now, what Jackie outlined there is a good background as to what we suffered. What I wanted to emphasize was the fact that there was absolutely no need for a new airport to serve the population of Barbuda. There is an existing airport, and that airport adequately served the air transport needs for the people who presently live there. There were no studies done to justify the need for any expansion. And so what happened with respect to that new airport, it was entirely to serve the needs of private individuals who wished to fly their private jet into Barbuda to live in what they call these exclusive residential communities. Now, what that points to is the fact that the venture overall was a real estate venture. Persons were interested in making billions of dollars by creating luxury real estate and to sell that luxury real estate to a particular clientele. That clientele happens to be jet flyers, and in order to make the whole package attractive, they needed to develop a private airport which could accommodate the private jets. Now, in terms of injustice, I think Jackie outlined a lot of the things that would have happened, but just to add some more, written into the lease agreement that was signed between the Barbuda Council and the Peace, Love and Happiness Company, written into that agreement, for the first, I think, 80 years of the lease, the sum total of the rent was $5.6 million US dollars, 5.6 million. Written into that lease, it mandated that $5 million US dollars was to go towards the construction of the airport. Now, in terms of the rent of our land and resources, what did we end up with? 600,000 US dollars? In addition to that, that agreement stated that the Peace, Love and Happiness Group would operate that airport as a fixed-based operation, FBO. So in other words, we have given up land. The rent we are expected to gain from that land, we now have to build an airport, which the renters now will operate to their profit to serve their clients. So we get nothing, essentially, out of this entire arrangement. Injustice. When you look as well at what we would have lost as a result of that airport being constructed, over 500 acres of forest was cleared. That particular land area disrupted habitats for wildlife and other creatures. It also included areas where Barbudans hunted and farmed. So we would have lost farm areas, we would have lost hunting grounds, and it would have disrupted the habitats for wildlife. Now, you're losing that amount of greenery, forest. It means that the carbon sink in terms of what Barbuda would have absorbed to basically slow down the climate change would have been eliminated to be replaced by asphalt or a runway, which would increase the severity of solar intensity and the heating effects on the island. So there was so much negative that was done as a result of this. Our laws require an environmental impact assessment to be done as part of getting planning permission. What we discovered in terms of our legal action, and one of the reasons why we decided to take the legal action, was that no environmental impact assessment was done, no proper assessment was done prior to the start of the land clearing and construction. So there were violations of our laws. There were violations in terms of treaties which we have signed on to. The Biodiversity Treaty, for example, the climate treaties, where we have obligations not to do certain things in order to exacerbate the climate crisis. So we have violated those things. And we have also violated our own planning laws with respect to how all that was carried out. So injustices and violations from all angles. So hence the reason we took the decision to challenge the matter in the court. And in challenging the matter in the court, the lower courts came down with a ruling that we did not have standing, which would have had implications for all other climate justice procedures, all other actions that would have been taken in the court against environmental impacts from ordinary people. Fortunately, we were able to reach our apex court, which is the Privy Council, and have that decision on standing placed in our favor. Now that opens up the door for protests to continue, for actions to continue, not only on these airport matters, but other matters relating to environmental justice, which we are facing in this climate crisis. So I will stop here because I think we have taken about 15 minutes, but that is a background of the facts of what happened in Barbuda, a flat, small island, one of the most vulnerable with regards to the climate crisis, and having imposed on us an airport which we absolutely have no need for, and which is not there to serve our purpose. It's actually putting us at a disadvantage. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much for coming on and sharing. Yeah, I learned a lot just from those 15 minutes. I hope we get to hear some more through questions, but just wanted to highlight how, yeah, the reason I'm so glad to have you on in this session is because, of course, I shared a lot of the kind of more broad figures and facts around what the sector looks like, which is a very helpful way to understand why it's unfair and unequal, but it's really stories like yours, just what you've been going through and what you've been exposing through your campaign that really shows the extremes of this industry and who it's kind of its true face behind the kind of greenwashed campaigns. So thank you. With that, I would like to open it up to